his most immediate threat is not coming from Joe Biden, certainly not from Lord Cameron, who he doesn't really rate very highly, but it's coming from his own political partners, those who control his fate, the far-right parties in his coalition. They're the ones who are demanding from him, and they've made also red lines that if Israel doesn't go in deep into Rafah and take the fight there to Hamas, they're threatening to leave his coalition to bring down his government. So first of all, he's talking to them. The preparations for the operation, Netanyahu's tough rhetoric is all designed to try and keep them in the coalition. That's his main concern.
You're with Kate and Adam here on Times Radio this Sunday afternoon. On the way, we've got the politics of wine for you as some of the world's best wines land in London this week. More on that to come.
Before that, though, the Israeli military has ordered more people to leave the eastern city of Rafah in southern Gaza this week ahead of a planned ground offensive. It's seen as a red line for many Western leaders. So what's behind Benjamin Netanyahu's decision-making, and what could his next step be? Joining us now is Anshel Pfeffer, who covers Israel for The Times. He's also the author of the biography Bibi, The Turbulent Life and Times of Benjamin Netanyahu. Welcome to you.
Good afternoon.
Could I ask you, first of all, what you think is going through Mr. Netanyahu's head right now as he talks about the necessity of completing the job against Hamas by having a ground offence in Rafah, and then here's David Cameron, President Biden and others urging restraint?
Well, based on what we've seen from Netanyahu in the past and what we know now of his political circumstances, he's playing for time. His most immediate threat is not coming from Joe Biden, certainly not from Lord Cameron, who he doesn't really rate very highly, but it's coming from his own political partners, those who control his fate, the far-right parties in his coalition. They're the ones who are demanding from him, and they've made also red lines that if Israel doesn't go in deep into Rafah and take the fight there to Hamas, they're threatening to leave his coalition to bring down his government. So first of all, he's talking to them. The preparations for the operation, Netanyahu's tough rhetoric is all designed to try and keep them in the coalition. That's his main concern. And that doesn't mean that he's going to send the entire divisions of the Israel Defense Forces into Rafah in days. He'll probably have a lot to listen to from the Americans and try and somehow find a way not to anger Joe Biden too much. But like I said, right now he's mainly playing for time.
And is it possible that there could be some kind of breakthrough involving the return of hostages that might stay his hand, or is he going to do this come what may at some point?
Well, that's the question that everyone's asking themselves also in Netanyahu's own war cabinet. That currently the proposals that have been made by the Egyptians with the American backing, they're actually two different proposals. There's a proposal or a response to the proposal by Hamas, and there's what Israel has already agreed to, and there's still quite a few discrepancies between them, which are critical. The question is, can they be bridged? Now, the more pragmatic part of the war cabinet is in favor of such a deal if those differences can be bridged. The Americans certainly are, and the Americans, at least in public, are putting the blame on Hamas for not for putting up too tough conditions to the deal. So the possibility is still there. But even if the working level teams that Israel has sent to Cairo will probably send again in 2 or 3 days, reach some kind of a compromise with the Egyptians and the Americans and Hamas, there still is the political obstacle back in Israel where Netanyahu has to face down the far right. So even if there is a deal on the table, and we're not quite there yet, there still are quite a few hurdles for that to pass.
And what's your assessment of the likelihood of a significant number of the hostages which are still held coming back alive?
Well, there are currently 132 hostages, believed at least to be in Gaza, who have been held there now for 220 days. Of them, around, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 38 have already been officially presumed dead by Israel. So those are bodies now, hostages. And Israeli intelligence believes that there are at least a couple of dozen more. So we're talking here in the region of 60 or 70 live hostages still being held, and they are now at the center of these negotiations. There are two groups of them. One group are women, perhaps some remaining children, old people, and the sick, and there assessed to be about 33 hostages of that category. And then there are soldiers and relatively young men who even if they're not soldiers, Hamas treats as soldiers, and they will probably be at the next stage of any kind of negotiations. But right now, the 33 hostages, that's the number that they're talking about. And the question is, can the conditions for their release be met? And that's what we're going to see from the end of this week, because this is a week in Israel with Memorial Day and Independence Day. So I don't think there's going to be any serious talks until at least Wednesday or Thursday.
And how would you assess the balance of Israeli public opinion between the hostages as being the priority and the priority being to eliminate Hamas?
So we're seeing it begin to shift. If early in the war, the support for a widespread, for a big military operation to destroy Hamas in Gaza was high, it was 70, 80% in Israel. And even though Israelis had lost trust in Netanyahu, that didn't go for the military. There was still very high support for the war being conducted as it has been for the last 7 months. We're beginning to see that shift. We're beginning to see 50, 60% of Israelis in the various surveys saying, if there is a deal on the table, then saving the hostages should be prioritized over continuing the war right now in Rafah. And we're also seeing people say specifically that they don't believe in this idea of a total victory that Netanyahu has been talking about. So even though I'd say that the majority of the Israeli public is not yet in favor of a full ceasefire, because I think they still feel that Hamas has to be destroyed because of what happened on October 7th, that majority is beginning to erode, and people are beginning to look certainly at a temporary ceasefire if it can save the hostages as the biggest priority right now.
Anshel Pfeffer, thank you very much indeed for being with us. You can read his reports, of course, in The Times.
Yeah, you can read all of that with a digital subscription. For a daily update on global affairs when you want it, you can search Times Radio's World in 10 podcast too. Next, though, slightly different flavour as we discuss the politics of wine. This is Adam Bolton and Kate McCann on Times Radio.